Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Spiral Guardians: A Journey Beyond Shadows. Beneath the floorboards of an ordinary townhouse nestled on a quiet, sun-dappled street, a secret world stirred into life each morning, silent to the ears of the towering humans above. This world belonged to the mini-folk, a family no taller than a teacup, with clever hands and curious hearts. They were known only to themselves as the Thimbletons, and to the rest of the world, they did not exist. The Thimbletons, comprising clever old Paxton, nurturing Marin, spirited young Luma, and her daring little brother, Pip, lived within the hollowed-out spaces of the walls, weaving tunnels behind the plaster and tile. To them, the great house they inhabited was not just a shelter, but an entire universe, one filled with endless adventure, wonder, and just the right hint of danger. Their home was carved into the thick wooden baseboard beneath the bay window of the living room. What to the humans was a small crevice by the radiator, to the Thimbletons was an arched stone entryway, beautifully framed with painted matchsticks and lined with crushed velvet from a discarded hair scrunchie. It opened into a cozy den with walls papered in the pages of a miniature storybook, furniture crafted from thimbles, corks, and buttons, and tiny lanterns made from old flashlight bulbs. But what made their home truly magical was not just the craftsmanship or the way sunlight filtered through the crack in the wall each morning, it was their bond. The Thimbletons loved their life in the shadows, where every corner held a story waiting to unfold. As the sun rose, golden beams streamed through the massive window pane above, casting warm light onto the windowsill world they called their own. From there, Luma and Pip would press their faces against the cool glass, marveling at the swaying trees that loomed like giants, the birds that darted like dragons between their branches, and the dew speckled leaves glistening like emeralds after a gentle rain. "This is my favorite time of day," Luma whispered to her brother as they sat cross-legged on a folded napkin that served as a picnic blanket. "It feels like the world is waking up with us." Pip squinted at a garden snail crawling slowly up the glass. "Do you think he's headed to school too?" he asked. "Maybe," Luma giggled, "or maybe he's the teacher." Their laughter was muffled, soft, but full of life. Down below, Marin was already bustling in the tiny kitchen, grinding a sunflower seed into paste for breakfast and slicing a dried blueberry into perfect wedges. Paxton, with his spectacles pushed up on his forehead, was hunched over a roll of human graph paper, plotting their next big exploration. Rumor had it the attic contained a forgotten treasure trove of human trinkets. But all plans could wait, for the morning was sacred. It was when the house above still slumbered, when the thumps and clatters of the giants hadn't yet begun. It was their time to venture out, to breathe the air that filtered down through the vents, and to dream of the stories waiting just beyond the corners of the next room. Luma nudged her brother. "Let's go to the window ledge. I think I saw a bluebird land on the railing earlier." Pip's eyes lit up with the thrill of possibility. Race you. They dashed off, nimble feet padding along a tightrope made of dental floss strung between two pushpins in the wall. Outside the window, the sun climbed higher, warming the glass and filling their little world with light. When they reached the edge of their perch, they both gasped. There, perched just a few feet away, was the most magnificent bird either of them had ever seen. Its feathers shimmered with shades of sapphire and teal, and in its beak, it held a sprig of something red berries, perhaps, or a flower. The bird turned, its eye catching the children, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed to nod before fluttering away. Luma clutched Pip's hand. "Did you see that? I think it saw us." Paxton, who had just climbed up behind them, adjusted his glasses. "Perhaps it did, my dear. You know, there are more watchers in this world than you might think. Not all of them are human." The siblings exchanged wide-eyed glances. "Do you think birds can talk?" Pip asked. "Oh, in their own way," Paxton chuckled. "But even more importantly, they remember. Birds are excellent keepers of secrets." It was in moments like this that the world of the Thimbletons felt larger than the space behind the walls. It felt as though the entire house was alive with stories, with signs, with subtle magic. Back in their den, Marin called out, "Breakfast is ready." The children clambered down quickly, appetites stirred by the excitement of the morning. At the table, they shared a meal of crumbs, seeds, and imagination. Each bite came with a story. Each sip of dew water was a toast to new adventures. When breakfast ended, Luma leaned toward her parents. "Can we go exploring today? Maybe to the great cupboard again?" Marin smiled but looked to Paxton. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Well," he said slowly, "if we time it right before the humans come downstairs, and if we avoid the creaky stair, then perhaps we can reach the cupboard by mid-morning." Pip clapped. "Yes. Let's do it." And just like that, the day's adventure began to take shape. They packed their satchels thimble-sized, of course with safety pins, chewing gum thread, and a single paper clip, invaluable for almost any unknown need. As they prepared, none of them noticed the faint shimmer on the windowsill where the bluebird had stood. A single feather no bigger than Luma's hand lay nestled among the dust motes, glowing faintly in the morning sun. Whatever stories awaited them in the vast, unexplored reaches of the human house, one thing was certain. The Thimbletons were ready. The cupboard was no ordinary cupboard, not to the Thimbletons, anyway. To the humans, it was a simple kitchen cabinet that housed cereal boxes, flour bags, sugar jars, and tins of biscuits. But to the mini-folk, it was a towering, sacred relic from a forgotten age, a fortress of abundance, a cathedral of curiosities. They called it the Cupboard of Wonders. Early that morning, with the golden light still dripping softly through the windows, Paxton led the way across the floor tiles, each one wide as a city block. Luma and Pip followed eagerly, satchels strapped across their backs, while Marin brought up the rear, ever the watchful guardian. Their path was carefully calculated, as always. They avoided the treacherous terrain near the fridge known as the Humming Giant and crept along the baseboard, where a small crack in the wood led into a vent shaft. From there, they emerged behind the dishwasher, crossed the silent bridge, a narrow stick laid across a mop bucket and a dustbin, and finally reached the base of the cupboard. Luma looked up, mouth agape. It's even taller than I remember. Marin chuckled, brushing a strand of thread hair behind her ear. That's because you've grown, darling. But it still feels like climbing a mountain, Pip added, eyeing the rope ladder already strung up one of the hinges, a makeshift contraption made of dental floss knots and paper clip anchors. Ready? Paxton asked, his eyes twinkling behind his spectacles. The children nodded. Up they climbed, rung after careful rung, the rope swaying gently with every motion. The climb itself was an adventure. Halfway up, Luma paused to steady herself on a dried flower petal wedged in the hinge. From there, she could see the whole of the kitchen floor behind her, the counter like a cliff edge, the table like a distant mesa. The world of the giants stretched far and wide, and still it was only one room. They reached the shelf just as a ray of light filtered in through the kitchen curtain, illuminating the interior of the cupboard. To the children, it was like stepping into a museum of treasures. "Oh, wow," whispered Pip. Before them lay a half-empty box of cinnamon cereal, its corner torn, revealing a golden opportunity. Scattered nearby were flakes as big as their hands, some resting like canoes atop a spilled bed of sugar crystals. Beyond that, a fallen teaspoon stained with traces of honey glistened like a polished silver raft. A tiny packet of salt, long forgotten, leaned against the sugar jar like a fortress wall. And at the very back, a cracked cookie tin loomed like a shipwreck filled with ancient treats. Luma stepped forward, her boots crunching softly on stray grains. "It's a feast." Paxton carefully examined a raisin the size of his fist. "Careful what you take," he murmured. "We don't want the humans to notice. Just a few crumbs. And always leave it neater than you found it." Marin was already breaking off a sliver of dried fruit with her sewing needle blade. "Let's fill the pouch. We can trade it for weeks." While the adults gathered provisions, the children explored. Pip scrambled onto a teabag box, peering into the dark corners of the cupboard. "Luma. Over here. I think there's a tunnel behind this jam jar." She joined him, curiosity prickling. Sure enough, a narrow gap between the jar and the back wall opened into a small crawl space. The air smelled faintly of peppermint and dust. "Should we go in?" Pip asked. Luma hesitated. She knew the rules: no crawling into unknown spaces without Paxton's say-so. But something about the tunnel tugged at her, like a whisper in the air. "Let's tell Pot," she said at last. Just as they turned back, a soft rumble shook the cupboard. Thud, thud, thud. Pip froze. Footsteps. The giants were waking. Marin reacted instantly, ushering the children toward the ladder. Quickly, back down. Cereal shifted. A sugar cube rolled. The entire shelf seemed to groan under invisible weight as footsteps drew nearer. They were halfway down the ladder when the cupboard door creaked open. A flood of light burst in, so bright they had to squint through it. Above, an enormous hand reached in 5 enormous shadows stretching across the cereal box. Then, a whoosh of air as the box was lifted. The shelf tilted slightly. A flake the size of a sled began to slide. "Hold tight," Paxton shouted, gripping the ladder as the giant flake tumbled toward them. It landed just shy of Pip, splintering into a shower of crumbs that rained down like golden hailstones. The hand withdrew. The door shut. Silence returned. The thimble tons hung suspended, breathless. Then Paxton chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, that was close." "That was awesome," Pip grinned. "We should come back when no one's home and finish exploring the tunnel." "We will," Luma agreed, already thinking about what might lie beyond that peppermint-scented gap. "Next time. But maybe with a rope. And a plan." Back on the kitchen floor, they returned through the silent bridge, ducked behind the baseboards, and slipped back into their hidden den. Marin lit a tiny oil drop lantern and unpacked the day's haul: 2 crumbs of biscuit, a piece of dried fruit, 3 sugar crystals, and a sticky glob of honey. A feast. They laid it out on their matchbox table. Paxton raised his thimble cup in a toast. "To small adventures in big places." "To the cupboard of wonders," Luma added. "And to secret tunnels," Pip cried. As they laughed and shared their treasures, none of them noticed the faint glow that still flickered in the jam jar tunnel. Deep within the cupboard wall, something was awakening. Something that had not stirred in a very long time. But for now, the Thimbletons were safe. The sun had barely begun to rise the next morning when Luma lay wide-eyed on her leaf-padded bed, staring at the ceiling of their cozy den. The events of the previous day had left her with the heart still buzzing images of the jam jar tunnel, the crumbling sugar cubes, and the mysterious glow that flickered in the shadows beyond it. Cupboard of wonders. She turned toward her brother, Pip, still curled beneath his patchwork blanket made from a cut corner of a dryer sheet. She reached out and nudged him gently. "Pip," she whispered, "are you awake?" Came the half snore, half hum. "Pip." "The tunnel." His eyes snapped open. 10 minutes later, with satchels quietly slung over their shoulders, the siblings tiptoed past the den's entrance. Marin and Paxton were still asleep, their soft breathing in sync like wind through the eaves. The children crept through the wall crevice and followed the familiar path behind the baseboard to the kitchen. But today, they weren't heading to the cupboard of wonders through the front. They were going behind it. The route they had mapped late last night was risky. It involved climbing through an old air duct, using a straw as a bridge, then crawling through a vent that hadn't been touched in years, possibly decades. But if it led to the peppermint-scented tunnel, it would all be worth it. The duct was narrow and rusted, filled with dust and echoes. Luma moved first, flashlight stone tied to her headband, a faint glow from a salvaged glow-in-the-dark sticker. Pip followed closely, dragging their supply tin behind him. "I think this used to be part of the old heater system," Luma said, brushing cobwebs aside. "Maybe it still is," Pip said nervously, eyeing a vent grate above them. "What if it turns on? Then we get very clean," Luma grinned. "Hold your breath." They reached the exit vent and gently pried it open using a bent sewing pin and the handle of a cracked Lego sword. On the other side lay a narrow ledge, coated with a light dusting of sugar, definitely the backside of the cupboard of wonders. They had made it. Luma's heart pounded as they stepped into the crawl space. It smelled stronger now, mint, yes, but something else, something warm, like old wood and forgotten spices. The tunnel they'd glimpsed yesterday lay just beyond a layer of shadow. Pip crouched beside her. "Do we go in?" Without answering, Luma took out the string of glow pearls they had collected from discarded sneakers and looped it around her wrist. "Let's find out." The tunnel was surprisingly tall, at least, tall for them. It stretched back farther than either had guessed, and as they moved deeper, they noticed the walls weren't just dust-covered wood. They were carved. Tiny grooves and markings, like ancient writing, lined the surfaces. "Whoa," Pip breathed. "Someone lived here." Luma ran her fingers over a swirl of symbols. "Or passed through a long time ago." They followed the tunnel as it curved gently to the left and opened into a cavernous chamber, perhaps a storage gap between walls where the smell of peppermint was strongest. There, in the center of the room, stood a tiny door. It was no larger than the palm of Luma's hand and made of smooth redwood with a perfectly round knob crafted from a broken marble. Around the frame, peppermint wrappers were braided like garlands. A single button had been pressed into the wall above it, bearing a tiny insignia, a spiral inside a sun. They stared at it, breathless. "I've never seen this part of the house," Luma whispered. Pip walked around the door, knocking gently. "Do you think it opens?" Luma stepped forward. "Only one way to find out." She reached out and twisted the knob. It clicked. The door swung open with a gentle creak, revealing a warm glow from within, amber light dancing across smooth stone flooring. The air that flowed out smelled like candy and cedar wood. And the voices soft, melodic, barely audible. They stepped through. Inside was a hall. Not a corridor, but a hall like something out of a royal palace, if such things existed in their scale. The floor was tiled with polished shell fragments, the walls lined with stacked peppermint sticks and lollipop stems carved into ornamental pillars. Lanterns made of gummy drop caps hung from silk strings above, glowing with a soft pulsing light. At the end of the hall was a single pedestal. Upon it rested a spiral-shaped crystal, faintly humming with energy. "What is this place?" Pip whispered. Luma stared in wonder. "It's a sanctuary." They approached the pedestal slowly. As they drew closer, the spiral crystal pulsed once, then flickered. And then a voice echoed, soft and old, like the wind through the leaves. "To the ones who remember the quiet and cherish the small, welcome. You are the first in 100 seasons." They looked at each other. "I think it's talking to us," Pip said. "The house remembers," the voice continued. "And so does the peppermint path. You have found what many have forgotten. You are the seekers." The glow from the crystal expanded, forming images in the air, tiny glowing trails, showing ancient mini-folk maps, secret passageways, long-lost gardens built inside unused drawers, and even old settlements hidden beneath the stairs. Luma's heart raced. This was more than a secret room. It was a forgotten history. A calling. "I think we're supposed to follow it," she said, stepping forward. "This map, it's showing us a path." Pip nodded, suddenly solemn. "Do you think Ma and Pa know?" "Not yet. But they will." As the glow faded and the crystal dimmed, the door behind them slowly creaked shut, leaving the two siblings alone in the flickering amber light of a long-forgotten hall. And though they didn't yet understand the full meaning of what they had found, Luma and Pip knew this was only the beginning. The peppermint secret had awakened something old. And the Thimbleton's world was about to grow much, much bigger. The days that followed the discovery of the Peppermint Sanctuary passed in a blur of excitement and secrecy. Luma and Pip had returned to the den as quietly as they had left, carrying with them not just crumbs and candy wrappers, but something far more potent, a sense of destiny. The spiral-shaped crystal, the ancient voice, and the hidden map had awoken something inside them that no sugar cube or thimble-built chair ever could. But secrets, like steam, have a way of rising. "You two have been oddly quiet," Marin remarked over breakfast one morning as she arranged slivers of dried apple into flower shapes. "You haven't even asked to climb the broomstick tower this week." Paxton peered over his monocle, which was actually a polished raindrop lens embedded into a wire loop. "And I haven't heard either of you whispering through the yarn tubes. That usually means trouble." Luma glanced at Pip, then quickly looked away. Pip did the same. "Just reading," Luma said quickly. "And drawing. You know. Stuff." "Reading and drawing stuff." Paxton raised an eyebrow. "They're up to something," Marin whispered to him as the children scampered off to their sleeping alcove. And they were. Because the peppermint sanctuary hadn't just revealed history, it had revealed paths. Secret roots running deep beneath the floorboards. Cavities within the walls. Forgotten hollows behind paneling and pipes. Each of them marked by a glowing spiral and a name. Some had whimsical labels like the Button Cavern or the Silk Slide, while others were more cryptic: Whispering Spine, the Hollow of Echoes, and the Watcher's Hearth. And then there was the Seed Vault. This last one was what captivated Luma. In the glowing vision, it had appeared as a room filled with luminous pods and tiny tree-like structures, buried beneath a part of the house they had never dared approach: the old storage closet under the stairs. It had been boarded shut for years. The humans rarely went near it. But to the Thimbletons, that made it sacred ground. The next morning, Luma and Pip sat cross-legged on their planning mat, a flattened sardine can label spread across a drawer base. "I think we should go today," Luma said, pointing to the faint spiral drawn in the corner of the human house map. "The weather's damp, so the humans probably won't go outside. That means fewer footsteps. Fewer surprises. But the route is long," Pip murmured, chewing on the end of a grass blade. "We'll have to pass by the cat's domain. That thing almost swallowed Uncle Fennel last spring." Luma exhaled. "We'll use the shelf route above the pantry. The cat never climbs that high." They packed their explorer satchels with care: a sliver of soap for scent masking, a tiny spool of unwound dental floss for rope, 2 peppermint shards for energy, and of course, the glowing map. Charm, which they'd managed to sketch roughly using fluorescent ink from a marker cap they'd cracked open in the attic. They left at dawn. The route took them through seldom-used corners of the house. Past the pantry's spine, through the dust route, past an old heating duct overrun with lint and forgotten toy marbles, and up the fork bridge, a makeshift structure of bent silverware carefully balanced on glue drips and bottle caps. The world grew quieter the deeper they ventured. The usual background hum of human life, the refrigerator drone, the TV murmur, faded behind layers of insulation and wood. Here, in the hollow paths, time seemed slower. The only sound was the soft tick-tack of their footsteps on old pipes and the distant drip of condensation. Eventually, they reached the closet. The door towered above them, cracked open just enough for too many folk to slip through. Inside, everything was covered in a thin film of dust. Broken umbrellas, forgotten boots, and half-crushed cardboard boxes created a miniature mountain range. And at the very back, hidden behind an old broom handle, was a knot in the floorboards. The spiral was carved into it. "This is it," Luma breathed. They knelt beside it, brushing away dust. Pip pulled out the tiny lever rod they'd taken from an old toy crafted from a snapped toothpick with a bent pin at the end and slid it into the knot's groove. The floor clicked. With a soft rumble, the board lifted, revealing a narrow tunnel illuminated by an unnatural blue glow. The peppermint scent returned, but subtler now, mixed with something else: moss, earth, old paper. They entered. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, nothing like the peppermint sanctuary. This was older, wilder. Bioluminescent fungi glowed along the walls. Moss blanketed the floor in soft tufts. Suspended in the air were dozens of seed pods, each encased in crystal-like shells that pulsed with a gentle light. And in the center stood a tree. Or rather, the idea of a tree. It wasn't tall. It barely reached twice Luma's height. But its trunk was thick, braided from what looked like silvered roots, and its leaves shimmered between real and not real, phasing faintly, as if they existed half in memory. Above it, the ceiling pulsed with a heartbeat-like rhythm. "What is this place?" Pip whispered. Before Luma could answer, a voice echoed, this time more distinct, less ancient. "You are not the first." They spun around. At the edge of the chamber stood a figure. A mini-folk, but not like them. His clothes were woven from bark fibers and soft shell. His beard was threaded with moss. And his eyes glowed with the same spiral shimmer as the sanctuary crystal. "I am Orwine," he said simply. "Caretaker of the seed vault." Luma stepped forward. "We thought this place was forgotten." Orwine smiled. "Many things are forgotten, but not lost. The vault remembers." He beckoned them closer. "This tree," he said, placing a hand on the silver trunk, "was once the heart of all many folk sanctuaries. Its roots spread through the old houses, the lost libraries, the castles turned apartments. It listens. It grows. And when the time is right, it calls." "Called us?" Pip asked. "Yes," Orwine said. "You two are the first in generations to hear the spirals whisper." He knelt beside them, producing a small leather pouch. Inside were tiny glowing seeds, no larger than sugar grains. "You will take these," he said, "and plant them where the many-folk spirit still stirs. Each one will awaken something old, something kind." Luma and Pip looked at each other. The weight of the moment sank in. No longer just explorers. They were something more now. Guardians. When they returned home that night, mud-streaked and glowing faintly from their brush with the vault's light, Marin and Paxton were waiting. "I knew it," Marin said, arms crossed. "You two weren't just drawing stuff. You found something, didn't you?" Paxton asked. Luma nodded slowly. "We found the roots. And we brought back seeds." There was silence. And then, a smile from Paxton that reached his eyes in a way it hadn't in years. "I think," he said quietly, "it's time we told you about our first map." And as the family gathered around the firefly lantern, ready to share secrets long buried, the seed sat in Luma's satchel, pulsing softly, waiting to grow. The tiny lantern flickered, casting shadows that danced across the patchwork walls of the Thimbleton's den. The scent of chamomile tea wafted from a thimble cup Marin had brewed, and the air buzzed with anticipation as Paxton unrolled a scroll unlike any Luma or Pip had ever seen. It wasn't paper, not exactly. It was a piece of aged fabric, perhaps from an old human handkerchief, stiffened over time and drawn upon with berry ink, soot lines, and traces of glittering mica. The lines weaved in spirals, loops, and symbols that mirrored the spiral crystal from the peppermint sanctuary. It wasn't just a map, it was a story. "You're not the first in our family to follow the spiral," Paxton said, voice hushed, as if the very walls were listening. Luma leaned in. "You've seen the seed ball too?" "No," he said, tracing a thin line on the fabric. "But I came close. My father and his brother, the Elder Seekers, they mapped the echoing corridors under the old manor, before we ever moved here. Their stories spoke of glowing roots and the whisper of trees. But one day, they vanished into the hollow of echoes. Only this map returned, tucked in the hem of my uncle's coat." Pip's eyes widened. "Vanished. Like gone." Marin spoke now, her voice gentle. "We don't believe they're gone. We believe they became part of the spiral's memory. That they're still watching, guiding." Paxton nodded. "The spiral doesn't end. It only folds." Luma was silent for a moment, then spoke. "We want to keep following it. There are still more places marked on the sanctuary's map, names we don't know. One was glowing stronger than the others." "Which one?" Paxton asked. Luma pointed to a star-shaped symbol near the edge of their sketched replica. "The Whispering Spine." Paxton froze. "I've seen that symbol before," he said slowly, pulling out a second, older scroll, this one brittle, almost translucent. There, near the bottom corner, was the same star-shaped mark. Beneath it, faintly etched in fading ink, "Echo sleep where wood forgets." Marin exchanged a glance with Paxton. "That would be the attic rafter." "But that place is sealed," Paxton added. "Humans never go there anymore. It's above the ceiling. Beyond even the rafters." Luma sat up straighter. "Then it's perfect." The journey to the attic wasn't just long, it was mythic. Many folk had ever reached the attic, let alone returned. It meant navigating upward through the oldest parts of the house, past the cracked laundry chute, across the tapestry bridge, a faded curtain tangled around a rusted coat hook, and into the skeleton of the ceiling itself, where time seemed to stand still. It took them 2 days of preparation. Marin fashioned cloaks from eyeglass cleaning cloth to shield them from dust mites. Paxton repaired an old acorn shell compass that pointed not north, but toward residual spiral energy, tuned, somehow, to the memory of old paths. And just before dawn, the Thimbleton children began their ascent. They climbed using copper wire coiled like rope, scaled nails driven into wall beams, and crept along ventilation shafts so old they crumbled beneath their feet. The higher they climbed, the older the air felt. Cobwebs were thicker, the silence deeper. And then they reached the rafter gate. It wasn't a gate in the traditional sense. It was a loose slat of wood that pivoted, if nudged just right, revealing the cavernous dark of the attic. As they squeezed through, a rush of cold air hit them, dust-laden and ancient. Above them, wooden beams stretched like the ribs of a sleeping beast. Light filtered in through a circular attic window, streaking across abandoned objects, an old birdcage, a cracked music box, and boxes of yellowed papers marked tax records, 1979. But it wasn't these things that drew Luma's eye. It was the whisper. Not a sound, exactly, but a movement in the air, a vibration along her skin. It seemed to come from beneath the floorboards of the attic itself. The whispering spine, she murmured. Pip nodded. We're close. They followed the current of still air, past piles of forgotten toys and broken photo frames, until they reached a cluster of bundled fabric, an old patchwork quilt, tossed carelessly decades ago. At its center was a tier, and beyond it, a small gap between the attic floorboards. The compass pulsed. Luma reached forward, gently peeling the cloth back. And there it was. A spiral etched into the wood itself. Unlike the peppermint sanctuary's clean grooves, this one was rough, frayed. It looked as if it had been carved not with a tool, but with desperate hands. They placed their palms on it. The world pulsed. For a heartbeat, the attic vanished. The quilt unfurled like wings. They weren't standing in dust and wood, but in light. In memory. Voices echoed not words, but impressions. A lullaby sung in a forgotten tongue. A fire crackling near a needle-woven hearth. A cry of warning. A sigh of relief. And a single name. Illyra. Luma gasped. Did you hear that? Pip nodded, stunned. It sounded familiar. The spiral pulsed again. And with it, a compartment clicked open in the floor, an impossibly small drawer hidden beneath the board. Inside was a scroll. Not made of fabric or paper but bark. Rolled tight and sealed with wax shaped into the spiral sun. Luma broke the seal. Inside were sketches, hundreds of them. Locations. Doors. Names. Faces. Many folk. Families. Explorers. Protectors. Generations of tiny people who had traveled the spiral before them. Some wore leaf cloaks. Others armor made of thimbles. One, a girl with braids and a sapphire pin, looked almost like Luma herself. At the bottom of the scroll, scribbled in a looping, hurried hand, were the words. The spiral remembers. Pass it forward. They descended slowly, scroll clutched to Luma's chest. That night, under firefly light and hushed-toned stories, Paxton wept when he saw the drawings. "That's him," he whispered, pointing to a sketch of a grinning man holding a miniature compass. "My uncle." And so the spiral turned once more. Not as a secret, but a legacy. The Thimbletons weren't just wanderers of old passageways anymore. They were its stewards. And the house above, the world beyond, the stars scattered in attic dust were only the beginning. The days grew shorter and the air cooler as autumn wrapped the house in a blanket of amber and rust. Outside, the world changed in hues of gold and crimson, but inside the walls, the Thimbletons were caught in a whirlwind of discovery and purpose. The ancient scroll from the attic had shifted everything. No longer just explorers or gatherers of crumbs, Luma and Pip understood that their lives were bound to the spiral, a path woven through the very bones of the house, whispering secrets, and calling its chosen guardians. One morning, after a breakfast of crushed hazelnuts and dewdrops, Paxton laid out the next part of the map. It was a collection of faded parchment pieces stitched together, worn at the edges and bearing strange glyphs. "This," he said, tapping the largest mark, "is the Watcher's Hearth." "The Watcher's Hearth?" Pip asked, eyes wide. "It's the heart of the oldest hidden chamber beneath the house, the place where the Minnefolk's ancestors kept their watch. It's a sanctuary, a place of knowledge and power, but also of great responsibility." Luma leaned in closer, tracing the jagged lines that led deep beneath the cellar. "How do we get there?" Paxton frowned. "It won't be easy. The path is treacherous, and it's guarded by the echoes." "Echoes?" Luma and Pip chorused. "The echoes are more than sounds," Marin explained, joining them. "They are the lingering memories of those who came before, spirits trapped between time and space. They guard the Watcher's heart to protect it from those unworthy." Luma swallowed. "Are they dangerous?" Paxton nodded gravely. "They test your heart and your resolve. Only those pure of purpose can pass." That afternoon, after careful preparation, the family set out. Their journey would take them through the cellar, a place the humans barely entered, filled with shadows and relics of forgotten years. The cellar was colder and darker than anywhere else in the house. Thick cobwebs hung like curtains, and the faint smell of damp stone filled the air. The only light came from tiny glowworm clusters that Luma had collected and bottled, now glowing softly in a glass jar. They slipped beneath the trapdoor, their feet silent on the uneven stone floor. Around them, old crates, rusty tools, and broken furniture created a maze of shadows. Paxton led the way, following the spiral map. "The path starts near the old wine racks," he whispered. As they moved deeper, the air thickened, and a low hum began to resonate. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, alive with memories. Suddenly, a chill swept through the group. Faint whispers echoed off the stones, voices carrying words of warning and sorrow. Stay close, Marin instructed, her voice steady despite the creeping unease. From the corner of her eye, Luma spotted flickering shapes, translucent figures shifting and swirling, like smoke caught in a breeze. "They're the echoes," Pip whispered, awe mingled with fear. One figure stepped forward, a shimmering form of a woman in flowing robes, her eyes filled with ancient wisdom. "Why do you come?" she asked, voice like a breeze through leaves. Luma swallowed her fear and stepped forward. "We seek the Watcher's hearth, to protect and carry forward the spiral's legacy." The echo's gaze softened. "Many have sought this path for power or glory. Few for duty. Your heart is true." She raised a hand, and the other echoes parted, revealing a stone stairway spiraling downward. Paxton nodded. "The test is passed. We go deeper." The stairs wound down for what felt like hours. The walls grew warmer, and soft golden light spilled from cracks in the stone. At last, they emerged into a vast chamber. In the center burned a hearth, a fire of ethereal blue flames, crackling without smoke or heat. Around it were ancient tomes, scrolls, and artifacts arranged on stone pedestals. The air was thick with magic and history. Paxton approached the hearth and laid a hand on its rim. "This is the Watcher's hearth, the source of the Minnefolk's memory and strength." Marin picked up a small, ornate box. Inside were shards of crystal, fragments of the spiral's energy, gathered over centuries. Luma's eyes were drawn to a tapestry hanging on the wall, depicting a spiral staircase ascending through clouds, surrounded by many folk figures bearing lanterns. "This shows the path ahead," she said softly. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a tall many folk cloaked in silver threads, eyes gleaming with light. "I am Ilian, keeper of the hearth," he announced. "You have passed the trial of the echoes. Now comes the responsibility." He handed Luma a pendant shaped like a spiral sun, glowing softly. "This will guide you and protect you. But it will also bind you to the spiral's fate. Are you ready?" Luma nodded without hesitation. Pip grinned. "We've come this far. There's no turning back." Ilian smiled. "Good. Because the spiral never ends. It only deepens." As they prepared to leave, Ilian cautioned them. "Darkness stirs beyond the hearth. Forces that seek to unravel the spiral, to silence its song. You must be vigilant." Paxton tightened his grip on his walking stick. "We will protect the legacy." Luma looked at her family, the weight of their journey settling on her shoulders. The spiral had led them here, but their true path was just beginning. Outside, the autumn wind whispered through the trees. And somewhere beneath the floorboards, the spiral pulsed, waiting. The morning light filtered faintly through the cracks of the cellar ceiling, casting long, flickering shadows across the stone floor. Though the Watcher's hearth had been passed and its secrets shared, an uneasy stillness settled over the Thimbleton's home. It was the kind of silence that presses on the chest, heavy with unspoken warnings. Luma awoke early, her fingers still clutching the spiral sun pendant Ilian had entrusted to her. It pulsed gently against her palm, a steady heartbeat syncing with her own. But beneath that reassuring rhythm lurked a shadow, subtle and cold, that whispered of danger. Down in the den, Paxton was poring over the ancient scrolls again. His spectacles caught the light, illuminating runes that twisted and shimmered across brittle pages. Marin was weaving protective charms from threads of spider silk, murmuring old incantations. Even Pip, usually restless, sat quietly sharpening a thimble knife. "It's coming," Paxton said without looking up. "The darkness Ilian warned about. It grows stronger." Luma felt a chill. "What is it?" Paxton's eyes met hers, steady and grave. "It's the unraveling. A force that wants to break the spirals weave to silence the memory, the legacy. It feeds on fear and neglect." "Have we faced it before?" Pip asked. "Long ago," Marin answered. "Before we settled in this house, the Minifolk's spiral was attacked. Many fell. The spiral weakened. And now?" Luma pressed. "Now, it calls to its guardians. To protect, to strengthen. That's why the spiral chose you." Luma gripped the pendant. "What can we do?" Paxton spread the map across the table. "We need allies." Their first step was to awaken the other mini-folk families still hidden within the house: the Clovers, the Nettles, and the Moonrises. Each had their own sanctuaries, paths, and strengths. The Clovers lived near the garden roots under the porch, a clan skilled in healing herbs and earth magic. The Nettles guarded the pantry shelves, fierce and cunning protectors of provisions. The Moonrises were the watchers of the night sky, guardians of the attic's forgotten windows. It was time to gather them. The meeting was held in the Peppermint Sanctuary. Luma, Pip, Paxton, and Marin stood at the center as representatives from each clan arrived, their faces marked by years of hidden struggle. The Clovers, led by a tall, gentle woman named Thalia, brought baskets of dew-soaked leaves and whispered blessings. The Nettles arrived with sharp eyes and quick smiles, led by a grizzled warrior named Bram. The Moonrises floated in like shadows woven from moonlight, silent but commanding, their leader a serene figure called Selene. Together, they formed a circle, hands joined. Paxton spoke, voice ringing clear. "The spiral is threatened. The unraveling seeks to destroy what we have built. But united, we can protect it?" Thalia nodded. "Our healing can mend wounds the darkness causes." Bram cracked his knuckles. "Our blades are sharp. We will fight to the last thread." Selene raised a hand, and the room dimmed, stars glowing faintly in the lanterns. "We watch through the night. We will not falter. Luma stepped forward, heart pounding. I carry the pendant of the Watcher's heart. It binds me to this fight. But we must act swiftly. Plans were made. Patrols would be established along the spiral's paths. Sanctuaries would be reinforced with charms and ancient wards. Messages would be sent to any other mini-folk still hidden in the far corners of the house. But as the meeting closed, a shadow lingered near the door, a silent observer. Unseen by the others, a pair of cold eyes glinted in the darkness. The unraveling had its own watchers. That night, as the Thimbletons settled in, Luma lay awake, the pendant warm against her chest. Outside the walls, in the spaces between, something moved, an ancient force, hungry and restless, stirring from its slumber. The spiral was no longer just a path. It was a battlefield. And the Thimbletons, with their newfound allies, would have to rise. The morning mist curled through the garden outside, weaving silver threads among the gnarled roots and fallen leaves. Inside the walls, the air hummed with tension and quiet preparation. The Thimbletons and their newly gathered allies from the Clovers, Nettles, and Moonrises clans had little time to savor the fragile peace. The unraveling was no distant threat, it was drawing near. Luma stood by the bay window, watching the faint glow of dawn stretch across the horizon. The spiral sun pendant around her neck warmed her chest, a constant reminder of the path she had sworn to protect. Marin approached softly, her eyes gentle but resolute. "It's time," she said. "The first trial awaits." Luma turned, meeting her mother's gaze. "What trial?" Paxton entered with the ancient scroll clutched in his hands. "The spiral calls us to prove our strength and unity. The unraveling tests not just our resolve, but the very bonds that tie us." He unrolled the map, revealing a newly marked location, the Vale of Shadows, a narrow passage hidden beneath the floorboards of the library, a place where shadows could twist and play tricks on the mind. "The Vale has guarded the spiral's secrets for centuries," Paxton explained. "It tests those who would seek to deepen their connection to the spiral. It will show you your fears, your doubts, and force you to overcome them." Pip gulped, nervously twisting a small charm between his fingers. "What if we fail?" Marin smiled reassuringly. "We don't fail. We learn. And we face it together." The group set out as the sun climbed higher, slipping quietly through the familiar tunnels until they reached the grand library. To the humans, it was a room of dusty books and forgotten lore. To the mini-folk, it was a maze of towering shelves and whispering pages, alive with secrets. Paxton pointed to a worn spot beneath the oldest bookshelf. "Here lies the Vale." Luma, Pip, and their allies gathered, taking deep breaths. The air grew colder, and a faint fog seeped from the floorboards, curling like ghostly fingers. Stepping forward, Luma placed her hand on the Vale's threshold. Suddenly, the world shifted. The walls warped and shimmered, the shadows lengthened, and the whispers grew louder, echoing doubts and fears from deep within their hearts. Luma saw visions of failure, the spiral breaking apart, loved ones lost, herself unable to protect those she cared for. Pip faced illusions of being lost and alone. The clovers saw their healing herbs wilt and fade. The nettles confronted their worst battles, shadows swallowing light. The moonrises felt the stars flicker and die. But they held fast. Luma clutched the pendant tightly, whispering, "We are not alone. We are one." One by one, the visions dissolved, replaced by a warm glow of shared strength. Their fears gave way to courage, their doubts to determination. The veil began to clear. From the mist emerged Ilian, the keeper of the hearth, his silver cloak shimmering. "You have passed the first trial," he said solemnly. "But the unraveling grows stronger. The next path is darker, and the cost greater." He handed Luma a small vial filled with a glowing liquid, the essence of the spiral, a gift to strengthen their spirits. "Use it wisely," Ilian warned. "For soon, the battle will move beyond shadows and into the heart." As they exited the library, the sun was setting, casting long golden rays through the windows. The many folk gathered, weary but unbroken. Luma looked to her family and allies. "We've come this far. We must keep going." Pip grinned, brandishing his thimble knife. "Bring on the next trial." Marin nodded, wrapping a comforting arm around Luma. "Together, nothing can unravel us." And far above, unseen but ever watching, the house itself seemed to hold its breath. The spiral's story was far from over. As the first rays of dawn pierced the veiled skies, the many folk gathered once more to prepare for their next journey. The trials tested not only their courage but the very essence of their unity. After emerging from the veil of shadows, the bond among the Thimbletons and their allies had strengthened, but the path ahead promised challenges that would push them beyond anything they had yet faced. Luma stood beside Pip, feeling the weight of the spiral sun pendant, a symbol of their sacred charge, and the vial of essence nestled safely in her satchel. The air was crisp and fragrant with the scent of fallen leaves and earth. Their destination, marked clearly on the ancient map by a leaf-shaped emblem, was known as the Hidden Grove. Paxton unfurled the map, fingers tracing the delicate threads that connected this new point to the Watcher's hearth. The Hidden Grove lies beneath the floorboards of the old greenhouse. It is a sacred place, where the echoes of the ancients linger, and where the spiral's roots run deepest. Marin's eyes sparkled with a mixture of reverence and caution. Few have ventured there and returned unchanged. The grove reveals the past as much as the future. With the ascent of the clans, the group set out, weaving their way through secret passages and forgotten crawl spaces. The path was more treacherous than before, the air heavier and laden with whispers carried on the faintest of breezes. Upon reaching the greenhouse's wooden floor, the many folk gathered around a section of floorboards overgrown with moss and delicate ferns. The patch glowed faintly with an otherworldly light. Here, whispered Ilian, appearing suddenly from the shadows. The spiral's heartbeat can be felt strongest. Luma knelt, placing a hand on the mossy patch. The ground beneath her fingertips trembled lightly, and a warm golden light surged upward, illuminating the chamber beneath. They slipped through the opening, descending into the grove, a vast subterranean sanctuary hidden from human eyes. The air was thick with the scent of ancient wood, blooming flowers, and something indescribably old like the breath of time itself. The chamber was a breathtaking mosaic of life, towering fungal trees with glowing spores drifting lazily like fireflies, crystalline vines winding along stone arches, pools of water reflecting, shimmering constellations, and at the center, a massive tree whose roots and branches wove together in an intricate spiral. "This is the heart," breathed Pip, awestruck. From the shadows emerged figures translucent and shimmering, the ancients. They were the first many-folk, guardians of the spiral, their forms shifting between the material and the ethereal. Luma stepped forward. "We come to honor your legacy and to seek your guidance." One of the ancients, a towering figure robed in leaves and light, extended a hand. "Then listen well, seekers." The ancients spoke in voices like wind through branches, recounting the history of the spiral, the battles fought, the sacrifices made, and the promise of renewal. "You hold the future in your hands," they intoned. "But beware, the unraveling grows bolder. It seeks to sever the roots and silence the song." Ilian stepped forward. "The spiral must be strengthened. The hidden grove's essence will help, but it requires a sacrifice." Luma's heart raced. "What kind of sacrifice?" "The sacrifice of certainty," Ilian replied. "You must give up what you know to protect what you love." A hush fell over the chamber. Each many-folk contemplated what giving up certainty meant, the letting go of safety, the stepping into the unknown. Luma gripped the pendant tightly. "We accept." The ancients nodded, and the great tree pulsed with light. From its branches, shimmering leaves drifted down, each one touching the many folk and infusing them with ancient power. Energy surged through Luma and Pip, their spirits intertwined with the spiral's deep roots. As they prepared to leave, the ancients' voices echoed one last time, "Carry this strength forward, and never let the spiral unravel." Back in their den, the many folk felt changed, stronger, wiser, yet aware of the fragile thread upon which their world hung. Paxton smiled, pride and concern mingling in his eyes. "The spiral lives within you now. The true test lies ahead." Luma looked around at her family and allies, determination burning bright. Together, they would face whatever darkness awaited. Because the spiral was their home and they would protect it at all costs. The air grew colder with each passing day, the subtle chill of winter brushing against the edges of the house. Outside, the world prepared to sleep beneath blankets of frost, but within the walls, the many folk stirred with a restless urgency. The unraveling, the creeping darkness that sought to sever the spiral's sacred threads, was no longer a distant whisper. It was a gathering storm. Luma sat near the flickering glowworm lantern, her fingers tracing the delicate lines of the ancient map. The spiral sun pendant lay warm against her chest, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the quickening beat of her heart. Around her, the murmurs of preparation filled the den, Marin weaving wards of spider silk, Paxton sharpening blades forged from thimble shards, Pip practicing swift movements learned from the nettles. The family had grown not just in number but in purpose. Their alliances with the Clovers, Nettles, and Moonrises clans had formed a delicate but unbreakable web, spanning the hidden realms beneath the human home. Together, they were the spiral's guardians. The morning heralded a council in the Peppermint Sanctuary, the air thick with anticipation and resolve. The ancient scrolls and maps were spread across the matchbox table, illuminated by the soft glow of firefly lanterns. Paxton, standing tall despite the years etched into his worn features, addressed the gathering. The unraveling approaches the heart of the spiral. The Watcher's hearth is under threat. Our time to defend it is now. Thalia of the Clovers nodded, her voice steady. The earth beneath us trembles with the strain. The roots weaken. Bram of the Nettles cracked his knuckles, eyes flashing. The shadows gather faster than before. We've seen them lurking near the pantry tunnels. Selene of the Moonrises added, the stars have dimmed. The night watches are restless. Luma took a deep breath. Then we must act as one. Protect the hearth, strengthen the spiral, and face the darkness head-on. The council agreed on a plan that balanced defense and discovery. Patrols would guard the spiral's key sanctuaries, wards would be reinforced, and the Thimbletons would seek the heart of the spiral, a legendary source of power said to lie hidden deep beneath the oldest floorboards. Their journey began in the cellar, where shadows crept and whispered like living things. The path to the heart was treacherous, twisting through narrow tunnels and forgotten chambers. The air grew thick with magic and menace. As they ventured deeper, the light of their glowworm lanterns dimmed, swallowed by an unnatural darkness. The walls seemed to pulse, as if alive, breathing in time with the spiral sun pendant. Suddenly, the ground trembled. A low, guttural growl echoed from the depths. From the shadows emerged twisted forms, shapes of darkness that flickered between solidity and mist. The unraveling had taken form, the wraiths of unweaving, ancient foes born of fear and neglect, hungry to tear apart the spiral's weave. The many folk braced for battle. Blades flashed, light against shadow. The Nettles fought fiercely, their agility unmatched. The Clovers chanted healing incantations, weaving nature's strength into their allies. The Moonrises used starlit arrows that pierced the wraith's ethereal hides. Luma and Pip moved together, the pendant's light guiding them. Luma channeled the essence of the spiral, a glowing energy that flared from the vial given by Ilian. Pip darted through the fray, striking with precision. But the wraiths were relentless. One surged toward Paxton, who countered with a thimble shard blade, sparks flying as steel met shadow. Marin wove a shield of silk threads, trapping a wraith in a shimmering net. As the battle raged, The walls groaned, and the very floor seemed to pulse with the spiral's heartbeat. In the midst of the chaos, Luma heard a voice's soft, urgent whisper rising above the clamor. "Find the heart." She knew what it meant. The heart of the spiral was not just a place but a source of power. If they could reach it, they might turn the tide. Calling to Pip, she dashed through a narrow crevice, guided by the pendant's steady glow. They arrived at a chamber bathed in radiant light. The heart. A crystal orb floated above a pedestal, pulsing with life and energy, surrounded by roots woven into a spiral lattice. Luma reached out, feeling the surge of warmth and strength flood through her. But the heart was guarded. From the shadows stepped a figure cloaked in light, neither entirely human nor many-folk. Ilian, keeper of the hearth, appeared. "You are ready," he said. "But to wield the heart's power, you must sacrifice." Luma's breath caught. "Sacrifice what?" "Your certainty. Your past. To protect the future, you must become part of the spiral's endless weave." She looked at Pip, then at her family and allies fighting valiantly outside. "I accept," she whispered. The orb's light enveloped her, weaving around her like ribbons of pure energy. When the light faded, Luma stood taller, radiant with newfound power. The pendant glowed fiercely, a beacon in the darkness. Returning to the fray, the many folk fought with renewed vigor. The wraiths faltered, their forms unraveling under the radiant light. Together, the spiral's guardians pushed back the darkness. As silence settled, Paxton gathered the weary group. "The spiral is safe for now," he said. "But the path ahead will only grow more perilous." Luma looked to the glowing pendant, feeling the spiral's pulse in her veins. They were more than guardians now. They were the spiral itself. And their story had only just begun. The calm after the storm in the cellar was only temporary. Though the wraiths of unweaving had been pushed back, the echo of their darkness lingered like a low, persistent hum beneath the floorboards. The many folk knew that this was but the first battle in a war that would stretch beyond the bounds of their hidden world. The spiral's heartbeat pulsed stronger now, but with it came a sense of urgency, a call to deeper mysteries and greater challenges. Luma stood beneath the great bay window, her eyes fixed on the fading light of dusk filtering through the glass. The spiral sun pendant around her neck pulsed steadily, but its light was now intertwined with a subtle rhythm, a secret message whispered through time. Paxton joined her, his face grave but hopeful. "The spiral's heartbeat is more than a pulse," he said softly. "It is a language. A code left by the ancients to guide those worthy of its power." Marin approached, carrying an ancient tome wrapped in cloth, its pages worn thin by generations. "This book holds the key," she said, opening it to reveal faded diagrams of spirals intertwined with musical notations and cryptic runes. Pip, ever eager, leaned in. "So, the spiral sings." "In a way," Paxton nodded. "The many folk have always understood the world through song and rhythm. The spiral's heartbeat is its song, a guide to its strength and its vulnerabilities. That evening, beneath the glow of firefly lanterns, the Thimbletons and their allies gathered in the Peppermint Sanctuary to decode the spiral's message. The ancient tome revealed a map of melodies, each spiral pattern corresponding to a tone or rhythm. It was a song of protection and unity, but also a warning. Luma carefully traced the musical spirals with her finger, humming softly. Suddenly, the pendant around her neck resonated, amplifying the melody. The room filled with a gentle vibration, and the walls seemed to pulse in response. "The spiral is calling us to learn its song," Luma said, eyes wide. "To truly protect it, we must become its voice." Paxton smiled. "Then our next trial is clear: we must master the spiral's song." The next day, the clans dispersed to practice and learn, each contributing their unique skills. The Clovers lent their knowledge of natural harmonies, teaching the group how to listen to the subtle sounds of the earth and plants. The Nettles shared rhythmic patterns of their swift movements, blending physical grace with melodic timing. The Moonrises, guardians of night and stars, taught the art of silent singing, vibrations so soft they could only be heard by those attuned to the spiral. Luma and Pip practiced tirelessly, their voices weaving the ancient melodies with increasing skill. The pendant guided them, glowing brighter as their harmonies grew stronger. Slowly, they began to feel the spiral's strength flow through them, binding them closer to their world and each other. Weeks passed, and the many folk felt the spiral's heartbeat grow louder and more insistent. But with this newfound power came new challenges. One night, as Luma and Pip practiced beneath the attic's circular window, a sudden chill swept through the room. The pendant's light flickered erratically. From the shadows emerged a figure, an ancient many-folk guardian long thought lost to legend. Clad in robes woven from silver threads and moonlight, her eyes shimmered with a deep knowledge. "I am Solara, keeper of the spiral's memory," she announced. "The unraveling seeks to silence the song. You must rise beyond the trials of shadow and sound. There is a place where the spiral's heartbeat is strongest, the core chamber. There, your mastery will be tested." Luma stepped forward, determination shining. "Where is this core chamber?" Solara's gaze turned solemn. "Beneath the heart of the house, beyond the deepest roots. But beware, the path is guarded by trials that test not only strength but the very essence of who you are." The following days were a flurry of preparation. The Thimbletons and their allies gathered supplies, strands of spider silk woven into cords of protection, shards of quartz to amplify the pendant's power, and notes from the ancient tome carefully memorized. As they descended into the depths, the spiral sun pendant's glow grew fierce, illuminating winding tunnels and vast underground caverns. Echoes of the spiral's song filled the air, weaving through the stones and roots like a living symphony. At last, they reached a massive stone door, carved with the symbol of the spiral sun surrounded by musical notes. Paxton reached out, placing the pendant against the door. The melodies they had learned harmonized with the pendant's light, and the door slowly creaked open. Inside, The core chamber was a cathedral of natural wonder, walls of living crystal pulsed with light, and the floor was a mosaic of intertwining spirals and stars. At the center stood a crystalline harp, strings shimmering with ethereal energy. Solara stepped forward. To claim the spiral's full strength, you must play the song of binding. Unite your voices and hearts with the harp's music. Luma and Pip exchanged a glance, hearts pounding. As their voices rose, weaving the ancient melody through the chamber, the harp strings vibrated in response. Light surged, spiraling upward to the ceiling and beyond, touching every root and branch of the spiral. The chamber glowed with life, and the spiral's heartbeat grew steady and strong. They had passed the trial. Exhausted but triumphant, the many folk emerged from the depths, their spirits bound to the spiral's eternal song. The unraveling would come again, but now the guardians were stronger, united by song, heart, and unbreakable bonds. Luma smiled, feeling the pendant's steady pulse. The spiral's story was alive. And so were they. The warmth of the core chamber's light lingered in their bones, but the many folk knew better than to mistake victory for peace. The spiral's heartbeat pulsed steadily, yet the unraveling's shadows still crept in the dark corners of their world. Days after their triumphant return, Luma found herself restless. The pendant's glow seemed to whisper secrets she could barely grasp, as if urging her toward the next chapter of their quest. Paxton had spent hours poring over ancient scrolls, while Marin prepared herbal brews that glowed faintly with the essence of the spiral. Pip practiced his skills with the nettles, learning the silent footfalls of a hunter. One evening, under a sky swept clean of clouds and sprinkled with stars, Ilian returned. His presence was as sudden as a gust of wind, yet as steady as the earth beneath their feet. "The spiral calls once more," he said, voice low. "Beyond the core chamber lies the luminous path, a hidden route bathed in eternal light. It connects the sacred places, binding the spiral's power. But it is also the gateway to the deepest shadows." Luma's eyes narrowed with determination. "We must follow it." Ilian nodded. "But the path is not visible to all. Only those truly bound to the spiral's song can see the luminous path. And even then, the journey tests your soul." The next dawn, the many folk gathered in the peppermint sanctuary, hearts steady but minds alert. The pendant pulsed with a soft, golden glow, and as Luma stepped forward, the air shimmered. Before them, a narrow corridor of light unfurled, a path woven from pure luminescence, twisting and spiraling through the darkness like a river of stars. "Follow me," Ilian urged. With each step, the many folk felt the path respond, brightening beneath their feet, casting away shadows and revealing truths hidden in the dark. Yet the journey was far from easy. The luminous path twisted through the forgotten recesses beneath the house, abandoned playrooms filled with broken toys, shadowed corridors lined with forgotten memories, and secret gardens where light danced upon dew-kissed leaves. Along the way, they faced visions, fragments of their deepest fears and hopes. Luma saw echoes of past failures, Pip faced the loneliness of loss, Marin relived the ache of sacrifices made, Paxton confronted his doubts as a leader. But together, their voices rose, singing the spiral's song learned from the core chamber. Their harmony wove strength into their hearts and light into the path. At the journey's end, they arrived at the sanctum of roots, a vast chamber where countless spiral roots converged, pulsing with raw energy. At its center lay the heart stone, a massive crystal pulsating with the spiral's pure essence. Ilian stepped forward. The heart stone is the spiral's source. To protect it is to protect all. Suddenly, the shadows returned, not the fading wraiths, but something darker, older, the unravelers, beings born of decay and despair, intent on severing the spiral's ties forever. The many folk braced for battle. The clash was fierce. The unravelers struck with relentless force, their tendrils of shadow reaching for the heart stone. The many folk fought with every ounce of strength, their songs piercing the gloom, their blades shining with light. Luma felt the pendant burn hot against her skin, its light enveloping her in a protective aura. She stepped to the heart stone, placing her hand upon its surface. Visions flooded her mind, the spiral's creation, the first guardians, the countless lives woven into its fabric. With a cry, she sang the spiral's song, her voice ringing clear and true. The heart stone pulsed in time, sending waves of light that shattered the unravelers, banishing them into nothingness. As silence fell, Ilian approached, his gaze solemn. You have defended the spiral's core. But know this, the unraveling's final test is yet to come. You must journey beyond the house to the world outside. Luma exchanged glances with Pip and the others. The world beyond, the vast, unknown, towering beyond their hidden sanctuary, beckoned. Their quest was no longer confined to the shadows beneath the floorboards. The spiral's story was expanding. And so were they. The dawn stretched across the sky with colors of fire and gold, casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood. For centuries, the Thimbletons and their allies had lived within the hidden crevices of the house, guarding the spiral's legacy beneath the floorboards, within the walls, and in the secret sanctuaries. But now, with Ilian's words ringing clear in their minds, a new chapter was unfolding. They must venture beyond the house into the vast, unknown world that loomed beyond their safe confines. Luma stood on the windowsill, the spiral sun pendant glowing softly against her chest. Her heart thumped like a drum, a mix of excitement and fear swirling inside her. The world outside was huge, towering trees, endless skies, rushing winds, and the unpredictable footsteps of the giants who lived above. Paxton approached her quietly, his face a mixture of pride and concern. The world beyond is both a threat and a promise, Luma. It will test you in ways the spiral beneath these walls never could. Marin joined them, carrying a small satchel filled with herbs and provisions. We must prepare not just for the dangers, but for the wonders. The spiral's reach extends far, but so do the shadows. Pip bounded up, eyes sparkling. I'm ready. Let's see what's out there. The group gathered their essentials, tiny backpacks woven from thistle stems, water collected from dewdrops, tools fashioned from scraps of human objects, a needle sharpened to a point, a spool of thread doubled as rope, a shard of glass as a mirror, and the ever-glowing spiral sun pendant. Before stepping beyond the familiar walls, Ilian led them to a secret door concealed behind a stack of old books in the attic. The door was small, no taller than a teacup, and opened into a narrow tunnel leading outside. As the door creaked open, a fresh breeze swept in, carrying scents of pine, earth, and distant rain. For a moment, none of them moved, caught between the comfort of home and the vast unknown. Luma took the first step, her small feet touching the rough bark of the giant oak tree that towered over their hidden doorway. To the minifolk, it was a mountain, its branches spreading wide like arms reaching for the sky. The world outside was alive with sounds, birds singing melodies unseen beneath the ceilings of their homes, leaves rustling in the wind, distant murmurs of flowing water, and the faint footsteps of humans in the distance. Navigating this enormous world was a challenge unlike any they had faced. Each blade of grass was a towering pillar, each puddle a shimmering lake. The sun filtered through the canopy, casting shifting patterns on the forest floor. The group moved cautiously, guided by the spiral sun pendant's steady glow. Ilian's voice echoed softly, reminding them of the spiral's purpose to bind all life in harmony. As they journeyed, they encountered new allies, forest creatures who recognized the minifolk's mission. A wise old beetle named Bramstone shared stories of the forest's ancient magic, while a flock of fireflies illuminated the path through thick underbrush. But the unraveling followed them. Dark tendrils of shadow slithered beneath fallen leaves, twisting roots, and into the undergrowth. The wraiths of unweaving were no longer confined to the house, they had crossed into the wild, hungry to consume the spiral's roots wherever they spread. One evening, as the minifolk camped beneath the glowing mushrooms of a forgotten glen, the shadows struck. Luma awoke to the chilling touch of cold darkness brushing her skin. Whispered voices hissed warnings and threats. Protect the Heartstone. Ilian's voice rang out as the group rallied. Blades shimmered in the mushroom light, the nettles formed defensive circles, the clovers wove protective vines and herbs, the moonrises called down starlit arrows. The battle was fierce and wild, fought beneath the ancient trees whose roots pulsed with spiral energy. Luma called upon the pendant's light, weaving the spiral song into a crescendo that surged through the forest. The wraiths screamed and recoiled, torn apart by the purity of their song and unity. After the battle, as dawn broke over the horizon, Luma looked at her friends, weary but unbroken. "We're no longer just guardians of the house," she said softly. "We're guardians of the spiral everywhere it flows." Paxton smiled. "The world is vast, and the spiral endless. Our journey has just begun." With renewed purpose, the minifolk pressed onward, ready to face whatever the great world beyond the walls had in store. The spiral's story stretched out like the endless sky, full of light, shadow, and unbreakable hope. The world beyond the walls was alive in ways the Thimbletons had only dreamed of. Each morning greeted them with the scent of pine needles, the chorus of birdsong, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. But beneath the beauty lurked dangers unseen, echoes of the unraveling that sought to sunder the spiral's bonds wherever they reached. Luma awoke beneath a canopy of towering trees, their branches forming intricate patterns against the brightening sky. The spiral sun pendant lay warm against her chest, pulsing with steady light. Around her, the other many folk stirred, some tending to the firefly lanterns, others gathering dewdrops and healing herbs from the mossy floor. Paxton unrolled the ancient map on a broad leaf, the inks faint but legible. "We are nearing the Forest of Whispers," he said gravely. "A place of great power and peril. The ancients say the trees themselves carry the memories of the spiral, whispering secrets to those who listen." Marin added, "But it is also where the unraveling's shadows grow strongest. We must be vigilant." Pip, ever eager, tightened his grip on his thimble knife. "Let's get moving." The Forest of Whispers was unlike any place the many folk had known. The trees were colossal, their bark etched with symbols that glowed faintly in the dappled light. Soft murmurs echoed through the air, carried on invisible currents that seemed to weave around the travelers like silk threads. As they moved deeper, the whispers grew clearer, words of warning, of hope, of ancient battles fought and won. Suddenly, the pendant's light flared, illuminating a clearing ahead. At its center stood a stone altar, entwined with living vines and blooming flowers. The air shimmered with magic. "This is the place," Ilian said, stepping forward. "The binding altar. Here, the spiral's strength can be renewed." The binding ritual was a sacred ceremony, passed down through generations of many folk. It required the voices and hearts of all gathered, singing the spiral's song in harmony to weave their energies into the very roots of the world. Luma, Pip, and the clans formed a circle around the altar. Marin sprinkled petals of sacred herbs, filling the air with fragrant smoke. Paxton lifted a crystal chalice filled with dew from the morning's light. Ilian raised his hands, and the spiral's song began, a melody soft and haunting, rising from the depths of their souls. The many folk joined in, their voices weaving through the trees, their hearts beating as one. The altar pulsed with radiant energy, sending waves of light rippling through the forest. The glowing symbols on the trees brightened, their whispers turning to songs of strength and unity. But as the ritual reached its crescendo, the ground trembled. The shadows gathered, coalescing into monstrous forms greater, darker than the wraiths they had faced before. The Voidborn, embodiments of the unraveling's deepest fears, surged toward the circle. The battle was fierce and desperate. The many folk fought with every ounce of strength, their songs battling the silence of the Voidborn, their blades shining with the light of the spiral. Luma felt the pendant's warmth grow into a blaze. With a cry, she channeled the spiral's song, her voice soaring above the clash. Light burst from the altar, cascading over the Voidborn like a tidal wave, dissolving their forms into harmless mist. As silence fell, the many folk collapsed, exhausted but triumphant. Ilian approached Luma, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done well, but the unraveling's final test awaits." Luma looked to the horizon, determination burning bright. "We are ready." The spiral's story continued, winding, growing, unbreakable. The night after the binding ritual, a heavy silence settled over the Forest of Whispers. The trees seemed to hold their breath, and even the usual chorus of nocturnal creatures was subdued. Beneath the calm surface, a deeper challenge was brewing, one that would test the Thimbletons and their allies not just physically, but in the very essence of their spirit. Luma lay awake in her leaf-lined bed, the spiral sun pendant resting gently against her chest, its glow dim but steady. The events of the day weighed heavily on her mind: the victory against the Voidborn, the overwhelming surge of power from the binding altar, and Ilian's ominous warning about the final test of the unraveling. The next morning, the many folk gathered around the ancient map, now worn and patched from countless journeys. A new location was revealed, a twisting maze marked by a jagged spiral, labeled the Shadowed Labyrinth. It lay beneath the ruins of an old garden shed, long abandoned, and swallowed by ivy and time. Paxton's voice was grave. The Shadowed Labyrinth is the spiral's ultimate trial. It is a place where light and darkness converge, where one's true self is laid bare. Only those with a steadfast heart can emerge unbroken. Marin nodded. We must prepare ourselves, for what lies ahead is not just a physical path, but a journey of the soul. Pip, though nervous, squared his shoulders. We've faced darkness before. We can face it again. As dawn broke, the many folk approached the ruins of the garden shed. To the humans, it was nothing more than a dilapidated structure covered in moss and vines. To the many folk, it was a gateway to the unknown. The entrance to the labyrinth was concealed beneath a rusted trapdoor, partially hidden by the roots of an ancient oak. Luma placed her hand on the spiral symbol etched into the wood, feeling a surge of energy pulse through her. With a shared breath, they descended into the darkness. The labyrinth was unlike any place they had known. Its walls shifted and shimmered, cloaked in shadows that moved like living creatures. The air was thick with a tension that pressed against their hearts, whispering doubts and fears. Each step forward was a battle against the mind's own shadows. Visions of failure, loss, and loneliness danced before them, challenging their resolve. Luma faced memories of moments when she had doubted herself, the times she felt too small, too fragile to carry the weight of the spiral's legacy. Pip confronted fears of abandonment and the loneliness of the unknown. Marin relived the sacrifices she had made to protect her family. Paxton wrestled with the burdens of leadership and the fear of failure. Yet, despite the shadow's assault, their voices rose in harmony, weaving the spiral song learned from their journey. Their unity forged a light that cut through the darkness. At the labyrinth's heart, they found a chamber bathed in a soft, radiant glow. At its center pulsed the core spiral, a living manifestation of the spiral's essence, a swirling vortex of light and shadow intertwined. Ilian appeared beside them, his gaze steady. The core spiral is the source of all balance. To protect it, you must bind your hearts to its pulse. Luma stepped forward, the pendant glowing fiercely. We are ready. As their hands joined over the core spiral, their voices lifted in the spiral's song, resonating with the very heartbeat of the labyrinth. Light and shadow danced in a breathtaking display, weaving together into a tapestry of harmony and strength. When the ritual concluded, the shadows that had haunted the labyrinth dissipated, replaced by a serene glow that filled the chamber. Ilian smiled, his eyes reflecting the swirling light. You have passed the final trial. The spiral is safe for now. Luma looked around at her family and allies, feeling the unbreakable bonds that had carried them through. The unraveling might return, and the spiral's story would continue to twist and turn, but together, they were a force that could withstand any darkness. The many folk stepped from the labyrinth, hearts alight with hope and courage, ready to face whatever the future held. The air inside the hidden den was thick with anticipation and the soft glow of firefly lanterns. The many folk gathered, weary but resolute, their spirits buoyed by the triumph of the shadowed labyrinth's trial. Yet, they all sensed a deeper transformation stirring within the spiral, a pulse that was not just their guide but a living force awakening after centuries of slumber. Luma held the spiral sun pendant in her hand, feeling its warmth spreading through her fingertips, a steady heartbeat in sync with her own. Around her, the clans exchanged quiet glances, each knowing that their journey had reached a pivotal moment. Paxton stepped forward, unrolling a new parchment, its edges frayed and ink faded, yet the spiral symbol at its center shimmered with renewed life. This, he said solemnly, is the Codex of Renewal. It speaks of the spiral's awakening, a time when the threads of their world are woven anew, stronger and more vibrant than before. Marin nodded, adding, "It is said that the awakening calls for unity not only within our kind but also with the wider world, the trees, the animals, the very earth itself." Pip's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Does this mean the spiral will grow beyond the house and forest?" "Exactly," Ilian confirmed. "The spiral's energy will flow through the land, touching all life. But this awakening must be guided carefully, lest the unraveling seize the moment to strike." The many folk prepared for a ritual unlike any before, one that would link their essence to the natural world and herald a new era for the spiral. They journeyed to the heart of the forest, to a clearing bathed in golden light where the oldest tree, known as the ancestor oak, stood. Its massive roots twisted deep into the earth, its branches reaching for the stars. Luma and Pip approached the tree, the pendant glowing brightly in unison with the tree's faint pulse. The clans gathered around, joining hands, their voices rising in the spiral's song, a melody of renewal, hope, and strength. As the song swelled, the ancestor oak responded. Its roots stirred, sending waves of energy rippling through the soil. The earth trembled gently beneath their feet, and sprouts of new life burst forth, flowers blooming, leaves unfurling, and streams sparkling in the sunlight. The spiral's awakening was underway. But the unraveling was not idle. From the shadows emerged a new adversary, a creature woven from darkness and decay, known only as the Wraith of Dusk. It sought to consume the blossoming life and snuff out the spiral's light. The many folk rallied, standing firm in the face of the looming threat. Their voices and hearts united, they channeled the spiral's energy, creating a shield of light and life. Luma stepped forward, her voice carrying the spiral's song in a powerful crescendo that echoed through the forest. The Wraith of Dusk shrieked, its form dissolving into a mist of shadows and silence. With the threat vanquished, the many folk felt the spiral's power surge stronger than ever. The awakening was complete, but their journey was far from over. The spiral had become a beacon, a living force connecting all beings, great and small. Luma looked to the horizon, hope shining in her eyes. Their story was no longer hidden beneath floorboards or whispered in shadows. It was a song sung across the world. The world had shifted, transformed by the spiral's awakening. The forest shimmered with renewed life, and the Minnefolk's song echoed through every leaf and stream. Yet, as the light grew, so too did the shadows lurking at the edges of their world. The unraveling had been driven back, but it was not defeated. Luma stood atop a moss-covered stone, looking out over the vast expanse of the forest and the hidden places beyond. The spiral sun pendant around her neck pulsed softly, a beacon of hope and a reminder of the journey still to come. Paxton joined her, his weathered face softened by the dawn's glow. The awakening has united us with the world beyond, but our task is far from finished. The spiral's strength depends on the bonds we forge within ourselves, with each other, and with all living things. Marin appeared, carrying a satchel of herbs and woven charms. The trials ahead will test not just our courage, but the very fabric of our unity. We must prepare, for the unraveling's return will be more cunning, more relentless. Pip, energized and determined, adjusted his satchel. Then let's face it together, no matter what. The clans convened beneath the ancestor oak, their circle tighter than ever. Ilian spoke solemnly, our next journey takes us beyond the forest to the river of mirrors, where the spiral's reflection reveals hidden truths. There, we will face the trials of reflection, confronting not only external threats but the shadows within ourselves. Luma felt a mixture of apprehension and resolve. The path ahead was uncertain, but their bond was unbreakable. The journey to the River of Mirrors was long and arduous. The many folk navigated towering reeds and crossed shimmering pools that reflected not only their images but their deepest fears and hopes. The river's surface was a living tapestry of light and shadow, revealing secrets and testing perceptions. At the river's edge, Ilian raised his staff, and the water's surface shimmered, revealing gateways to visions of past, present, and possible futures. Each many-folk stepped forward, facing reflections that challenged their beliefs and resolve. Luma saw herself not just as a guardian but as a leader burdened with impossible choices. Pip faced visions of isolation and the cost of courage. Marin relived moments of sacrifice and the strength found in vulnerability. Paxton confronted the fear of losing the legacy he cherished. Together, their voices rose in the spiral's song, weaving a melody that embraced both light and shadow. The river calmed, and the reflections merged into a single, radiant spiral, a symbol of unity and strength. From the depths of the river emerged the guardian of reflection, a being of light and water, embodying the balance of the spiral's essence. It spoke, "You have faced your truths and embraced your bonds." The spiral's strength lies not in isolation but in connection. The guardian bestowed upon each many-folk a token, a crystal shard imbued with the power of reflection, to guide and protect them in the trials ahead. As the many-folk prepared to leave the river's edge, a distant roar echoed through the forest, the unraveling stark herald, signaling a new challenge looming on the horizon. Luma tightened her grip on her pendant, determination blazing in her eyes. We face the future as one. The spiral's song grew louder, a beacon of hope and resilience against the encroaching darkness. Their journey continued bound by light, united in purpose, ready to face whatever came next. The whispering winds carried a chill that seeped deep into the bones of the forest, signaling the arrival of a season long forgotten by many, the veil between worlds. It was a time when the boundaries between the known and the unknown thinned, when the unseen brushed against the visible, and when destinies were tested beyond the veil of reality. Luma awoke to a soft glow filtering through the canopy above. The spiral sun pendant pulsed with a new rhythm, faster, urgent, as if the spiral itself was calling her to a fate beyond what they had imagined. Around her, the many folk prepared in hushed anticipation, gathering relics and charms, sharpening blades, and readying their voices for the trials that awaited. Paxton's gaze was steady but serious. The veil between worlds is more than a passage, it is a crucible. Only those who understand the depths of their hearts can walk its path. Marin added softly, we must journey beyond the familiar, beyond even the spiral's known reaches, to face what lies hidden in shadow and light. Pip, ever restless, grinned. I say we meet it head on. The journey to the Vale was unlike any before. The many folk traveled beyond the forest, past the river's shimmering surface, into lands where the air grew thin and the skies stretched vast and wild. The stars above seemed closer here, their light sharper and colder. The path wound through ancient ruins, remnants of forgotten dwellings swallowed by time and nature. Statues, weathered and moss-covered, bore the spiral symbol, silent sentinels of the past. At the journey's end, the vale awaited, a shimmering curtain of light and shadow stretched across a narrow valley. The air vibrated with power, and beyond the veil, distant shapes flickered like flames in the dark. Ilian stepped forward, voice solemn. Beyond this veil lies the crossroads of fate, where choices echo through time, and where the spiral's future will be forged. Crossing the veil was disorienting. Time seemed to bend and stretch, moments folding over themselves like waves. The many folk found themselves in a realm both familiar and strange, the very fabric of reality shimmering and shifting. They were met by guardians of the crossroads, beings of light and shadow, testing their courage, wisdom, and unity. Each trial was a reflection of their inner selves, fears to confront, bonds to strengthen, truths to embrace. Luma faced a vision of a world without the spiral, cold, silent, and broken. Pip encountered the loneliness of endless wandering. Marin was challenged to let go of pain long held. Paxton was called to trust beyond reason. Together, their voices rose, weaving the spiral's song into a tapestry of strength and hope. The veil shimmered, and the path forward unfolded. At the heart of the crossroads, they found a crystal pillar, the nexus of destiny. It pulsed with the spiral's core energy, a beacon of creation and balance. Ilian stepped forward. The spiral's fate rests here. To secure its future, you must bind your destinies with the nexus. Luma and the others joined hands around the pillar, singing the spiral's song in unison. The nexus glowed, sending ripples of light cascading through the veil and beyond. As they emerged from the veil between worlds, the many folk felt a renewed sense of purpose. The unraveling's thread remained, but now, so did their hope, brighter and stronger than ever. The spiral's story was far from over. It was a living song, rising with every heartbeat, every breath, every choice. And the Thimbleton's guardians of the spiral would carry it forward, into the light. The air was thick with tension as twilight bled into the velvet folds of night. The many folk stood at the edge of the great clearing, a place spoken of in whispers, where all paths of the spiral converged. Here, beneath the ancient canopy of the elder trees, the fate of their world would be decided. Luma felt the spiral sun pendant blaze against her chest, its heartbeat syncing with the wild rhythm of the forest. Around her, the gathered clans, clovers, nettles, moonrises, and the Thimbletons formed a circle of light and resolve. The many trials had forged them into a unified force, but the unraveling's shadow still lurked, more determined and cunning than ever. Paxton stepped forward, voice steady and commanding. This is the final convergence. The spiral's core energy must be bound anew to withstand the unraveling's last assault. The binding ritual will seal our unity, but it requires sacrifice, courage, and unwavering faith. Marin's eyes glistened with both hope and sorrow. We stand not just for ourselves, but for all life entwined in the spiral's embrace. Tonight, we become one with the song forever. The ritual began as the moon ascended, casting silver light through the branches. Each many folk placed a hand upon the ancient stone altar at the center, their voices rising in the spiral's song melodies woven from every trial, every victory, every bond forged in fire and shadow. The spiral sun pendant pulsed, casting radiant patterns across the clearing. The elder trees seemed to lean in, their leaves whispering encouragement and strength. The ground trembled gently, as the spiral's power surged through roots and stones. But the unraveling would not yield so easily. From the depths of the shadowed woods emerged the unravelers, wraith-like forms swirling with malice, seeking to break the binding ritual and consume the spiral's heart. The many folk braced, swords drawn, voices unbroken. A fierce battle ensued, light clashing against darkness beneath the ancient trees. The Minnefolk's song wove a shield of shimmering energy, deflecting the unravelers' tendrils. Blades sang as they struck, and the air thrummed with power. Luma's voice soared, carrying the spiral's song in a crescendo that rippled through the clearing. The pendant flared brilliantly, a beacon of hope and unity. As the ritual reached its peak, a brilliant light erupted from the altar, enveloping all present. The spiral's core energy bound the many folk and their allies, weaving their spirits into the eternal song. The unraveler shrieked, dissolving into mist as the binding ritual sealed the spiral's strength anew. Exhausted but triumphant, the many folk stood united, their bonds unbreakable. Ilian's voice echoed softly, "The spiral lives because of you." Its song will carry on through generations, its light unyielding. Luma looked to the night sky, stars shining like guides. We are the spiral's voice, its heart, its protectors. Paxton smiled, eyes filled with pride. And our story, like the spiral, will never end. As dawn broke, the great clearing blossomed with new life. The spiral's awakening was complete, a beacon of hope against any darkness. The Thimbletons and their allies had fulfilled their destiny, but their journey was eternal. For the spiral's song was infinite. And so was their courage. The first light of dawn painted the horizon in soft hues of rose and gold, casting a gentle glow over the great clearing where the final binding ritual had taken place. The air was still thick with the residue of ancient magic, and the many folk stood in reverent silence, their hearts intertwined with the eternal song of the spiral. Luma gazed upward, the spiral sun pendant resting warm and steady against her chest, its light harmonizing with the rising sun. Around her, the clans gathered clovers, nettles, moonrises, and the Thimbletons, each bearing the marks of their journey, scars of battle, whispers of ancient wisdom, and the radiant glow of newfound hope. Paxton stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of years and the hope of generations. The spiral has been reborn through our unity and courage. Its song will now echo through time, unbroken and everlasting. But with this rebirth comes a promise, a duty to nurture and protect, to teach, and to remember. Marin nodded, eyes shining with tears of joy and pride. We are the keepers of this promise. The spiral's story is ours to tell and to live. Pip, ever the spirited heart of their group, grinned broadly. Then let's make sure our story is one of light and laughter, courage and kindness. The days that followed were a celebration of life and renewal. The many folk worked together to strengthen their sanctuaries and extend the spiral's reach throughout the forest and beyond. New paths were forged, and old ones rekindled with light and song. The clovers taught the healing arts to neighboring creatures, sharing the spiral's gift of life. The nettles patrolled the borders, their keen eyes and swift feet guarding against any lingering shadows. The moonrises kept watch through the night, their silent songs weaving protection beneath the stars. Luma and Pip led the way, their bond unbreakable and their spirits bound to the spiral's endless dance. But beyond their joyous work, a deeper mystery awaited, a promise whispered by Ilian before the final ritual. There is always more, he had said. The spiral's journey is infinite. And so is the song it sings. One evening, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Luma stood at the edge of the great clearing, the pendant glowing softly. She felt a new pulse within the spiral's heartbeat, a call to venture beyond the known, to seek new wonders and face new challenges. Paxton joined her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The spiral is calling you once more. Marin appeared, her eyes full of warmth and encouragement. Are you ready, Luma? Luma smiled, her heart swelling with courage. Always. Together with their allies, the many folk prepared to embark on a new journey, one that would lead them beyond the forest, beyond the mountains, into lands untouched by their ancestors. The spiral's song would guide them, a melody of hope, unity, and endless discovery. As they stepped forward into the unknown, the spiral sun pendant blazed brightly, a beacon of light in a world full of shadows and wonder. Their story, like the spiral itself, was everlasting. And the promise of dawn was theirs to keep. Uta. The Spiral Guardians, A Journey Beyond Shadows. Amota. In a hidden world beneath the floorboards, the tiny mini-folk known as the Thimbletons and their allies embark on an epic journey to protect the ancient spiral, a living force connecting all life. From secret sanctuaries beneath a human house to the vast, wild forests beyond, they face darkness incarnate, the unraveling, a creeping shadow seeking to sever the spiral's sacred bonds. Through trials of shadow and song, ancient rites, and battles against ethereal foes, the mini-folk discover the power of unity, courage, and sacrifice. As the spiral awakens, its guardians must venture beyond the familiar, embracing their destiny to weave light into a world teetering on the brink. Join Luma, Pip, and their clan as they face the unknown, bound by the eternal song of the spiral, a tale of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds that hold the world together.